At 3900 South Hempfield Street in Fort Worth, Texas, there is a Dollar General store sitting quietly on the corner of a residential street. Most people who walk past it have no idea what happened there, but in 1999, that building became the site of one of the most disturbing public health incidents in Texas history, a biological nightmare that festered in silence for over 90 days, while the city argued about whose job it was to do something about it. The building originally opened in the 1980s as the Dallas Bay Supermarket, known locally as Daniel's Food Stores, a 36,000-square-foot grocery store serving the surrounding community for over a decade. Then, on the 29th of May, 1994, everything changed. 18-year-old store manager Eduardo Lopez was approached by a gunman who demanded access to the safe. Eduardo had no choice. He took the man to the office. He was shot and killed, his body hidden in the freezer. To this day, no suspects have ever been publicly identified. No one has ever been charged. The case remains completely cold. The store limped on for 3 more years before finally closing its doors in 1997. The building sat empty until 2 unknown individuals recently arrived from Los Angeles, purchased it, and took out a $975,000 business loan from the Advanced Investment Corporation to be repaid over 15 years. They renamed it the Mexia Supermarket, opened for business in late 1998. Within a year, they were filing for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, owing over $1.1 million to various creditors. And on September 28, 1999, ownership of the Mexia Supermarket transferred to a bankruptcy trustee. The owners fled back to Los Angeles. They left everything behind: the food, the stock, the refrigerators, the entire contents of a 36,000-square-foot supermarket. And due to a series of miscommunication errors between the trustee and the city, nobody went in. Nobody checked. Nobody did anything. Then the electricity was shut off, and the refrigerators stopped. By mid-October of 1999, residents living near the store began noticing something wrong. A smell, not just unpleasant, but physically overwhelming. A housekeeper who worked nearby described it this way: "It is strong, especially when the wind is blowing. I told my husband several times that something smelled awful. Something smelled like dead animals. Then one day I walked over there and there were flies all over it." Fort Worth officials launched an investigation. A company called A+ Budget Movers was hired to begin the cleanup on the 2nd of November. They showed up, walked to the entrance, and refused to go inside. They said the job was beyond their expertise. That is how bad it was. Somehow, that still wasn't enough to deter 2 teenage boys who broke in on the 13th of November to steal non-food items from inside. Police found them on the roof after a short foot chase. Their justification: it was one of their 18th birthdays and they wanted to do something memorable. They weren't the only ones. Court records later revealed a 55-year-old man had also broken in and found a large quantity of cigarettes, batteries, and a 12-pack of beer among the rot. And a third break-in was reported, the suspect escaping through a fire exit. People were breaking into a biological disaster zone for cigarettes and beer. Eventually, Fort Worth's Department of Environmental Management had no choice but to handle it themselves. 2 officials, Brian Borner and Jimmy McClurg, went to assess the building before the cleanup could begin. What they found on the outside alone required emergency measures. The building was swarming with rats and cockroaches. Barricades were erected around the perimeter to stop them spreading into the surrounding neighborhood. Pesticides were sprayed around the entire building. Then workers from Garner Environmental Services went in hazmat suits, air filtering masks, oxygen tanks, and had to be fully decontaminated before exiting the property every single time. What they found inside was apocalyptic. Rat droppings covered every floor surface. Flies were so thick that if you held out your hand, you could not see it. Numerous insect species crawled across every surface. Others had died and were decomposing where they lay. Fruits and vegetables had dissolved into unrecognizable matter. Milk containers had physically exploded from the buildup of lactic acid and gas. Packaged meat was either completely untouched by bacteria or covered in a gray-black biological mass that nobody could identify. Worker Todd Johnson later said it was one of the worst-smelling projects in my history. When rats die from the bacteria, you truly understand that it is a bad atmosphere and lethal for workers. Brian Borner, 14 years in environmental management, said he had never heard of anything like it. The cleanup ran from the 16th of November through to the end of the month. Food had to be removed moved by hand, with shovels and front-end loaders used for the material that had become too deteriorated to pick up. Everything was bagged in hazardous material containers and driven to the local landfill. The entire store was fumigated. The final cost to the city of Fort Worth, over $100,000, paid by taxpayers, because the owners had already left the country. The story remained almost completely unknown until the 26th of January, 2010, when the History Channel program Life After People aired an episode called The Last Supper. It used roughly 90 seconds of footage from the Mexia Supermarket cleanup to illustrate what would happen to food supplies if humanity disappeared. 90 seconds from a 36,000 square foot biological horror scene that required full hazmat teams. 90 seconds was all that was ever shown publicly, and people noticed. Lost media researchers later discovered that the original footage had been recorded on a home VHS camera by Jimmy McClurg himself. Much of it had deteriorated beyond recovery. McClurg has since passed away. The original copy of the recording is missing. Only the brief fragments shown on the History Channel program have ever been confirmed to exist. The Southwest Collection at the University of Texas at Arlington holds photographs taken during the cleanup, but no additional footage has ever been publicly located. Jan Pruitt, the executive director of the North Texas Food Bank, said it simply, "It made us all sick. All that food wasted, and it could have been saved with just one phone call. It doesn't matter which food bank you call anybody." A cold case murder from 1994. Owners who abandoned $1 million debt and fled the country. A city that took months to act while a biological catastrophe grew inside a locked building. Residents who got headaches walking past it on the way to work. And somewhere out there, a VHS tape that captured all of it, that nobody has ever found.